Eritrea has been settled since prehistoric times. The inhabitants of the area had contact with other civilizations of the ancient world through trade. The kingdom of Aksum developed as a local power by 100 CE and by the end of the 4th century ruled the northern stretches of the Ethiopian plateau and the eastern lowlands. An important trade route led from the port of Adulis near modern Zula to the city of Aksum, the capital, located in what is now the Ethiopian province of Tigray. After extending its power at times as far afield as modern Egypt and Yemen, Aksum began to decline into obscurity in the 6th century CE. Beginning in the 12th century, however, the Ethiopian, Zagwe, and Solomonid dynasties held sway to the fluctuating extent over the entire plateau and the Red Sea coast. Eritrea's central highlands, known as the Merimalash, were the northern frontier region of the Ethiopian kingdoms and were ruled by a governor. The control exercised by the crown over this region was never firm, and it became even more tenuous as the center of Ethiopian power moved steadily southward to Gondar and Shewa. Highland Eritrea became a vassal fiefdom of the lords of Tigray, who were seldom on good terms with the dominant Amhara branch of the Ethiopian family. Off of the plateau, the pastoralist peoples in the west and north knew no foreign master until the early 19th century when the Egyptians invaded Sudan and raided deep into the Eritrean lowlands. The Red Sea coast, having a strategic and commercial importance, was contested by many powers. In the 16th century, the Ottomans occupied the Dalak archipelago and then Massawa, where they maintained, with occasional interruption, a garrison for more than 3 centuries. Also in the 16th century, Eritrea was as Ethiopia was affected by the invasions of Almagran, the Muslim leader of the Sultanate of Adal. After the expulsion of Ahmad's forces, the Ottomans temporarily occupied even more of Eritrea's coastal area. In 1865, the Ethiopians obtained Massawa from the Ottomans. From there, they pushed inland to the plateau, until in 1875, an Egyptian force that reached the Meru River was annihilated by Ethiopian forces. Meanwhile, the opening of the Suez Canal in 1869 had made the Red Sea a scene of rivalry among the world's most powerful states. Between 1869 and 1880, the Italian Navigation Company purchased from the local Sultan stretches of the Red Sea coast adjoining the village of Aseb. In 1882, these acquisitions were transferred to the Italian state, and in 1885, Italian troops landed in Eritrea. There was no resistance by the Egyptians at Massawa, and protests made by the Ethiopians were ignored. Italian forces then systematically spread out from Massawa towards the highlands. The Italians' expansion onto the plateau was initially opposed by the emperor, the only Tigray to wear the Ethiopian crown in modern times. But his successor, in return for weapons they needed to fight possible rivals, let the Italians occupy the region north of the Mereb. In the Treaty of Wichale, signed on May 2nd of 1889, the new leader recognized Italian possessions in the Red Sea, and on January 1st of 1890, the Italian colony of Eritrea was officially proclaimed. From Eritrea, the Italians launched several incursions into Ethiopia, only to be decisively defeated by the Ethiopian army at the Battle of Adwa on March 1st of 1896. The Ethiopian leader did not pursue the defeated enemy across the Mereb. Soon afterward, he signed the Treaty of Addis Ababa, obtaining Italian recognition of Ethiopia's sovereignty in exchange for his recognition of Italian rule over Eritrea. Eritrea had no valuable resources for exploitation and was not a wealth-producing colony for Italy. In fact, the colony was subsidized by the Italians, an extraneous factor that gave the local economy an artificial glow. Investment in education for Eritreans was negligible. There were very few schools for them, and these were limited to the primary level. Also, Eritreans were not employed in the colonial service except as laborers and soldiers. As preparations for the Italian invasion of Ethiopia got underway in the mid-1930s, several thousand Eritreans were recruited to serve in the invading army. Italy's invasion and occupation of Ethiopia beginning in 1935, including Ethiopia's invasion and incorporation into Italian East Africa in 1936, marked the last chapter in Italian colonial history. The chapter came to an end with the eviction of Italy from the Horn of Africa by the British in 1941 during World War II. The following decade, during which Eritrea remained under British administration, was a period of intense political and diplomatic activity that shaped the future of Eritrea. Landlocked Ethiopia coveting Eritrea's two seaports, launched an early campaign to annex the former colony, claiming that it had always been part of Ethiopia's domain. Lobbying of the Allied powers was carried out, and within Eritrea, with the help of Ethiopian Orthodox clergy, support for annexation was mobilized on the basis of religious loyalty. In order to promote the union with Eritrea and Ethiopia, a unionist party was formed in 1946. It was financed and guided from the Ethiopian capital of Addis Ababa. Eritrea's Muslims had every good reason to oppose union with Ethiopia, where Christianity was the official religion and Muslims suffered discrimination in many areas of life. In order to counter Christian mobilization for union, a Muslim League was founded in 1947 to campaign for Eritrean independence. Thus, although there were some Christians who favored independence and a few Muslims who were favorable to union with Ethiopia, the political division was drawn largely along sectarian lines. Muslims have been the first to suffer from Ethiopia's intervention in Eritrea, and it was they who formed the first opposition movement. In 1960, leaders of the defunct independence movement, who were then living in exile, announced the formation of the Eritrean Liberation Front, or the ELF. The founders, all Muslims, were led by Idris Mohammed Adam, a leading political figure in Eritrea in the 1940s. By the mid-1960s, the ELF was able to field a small guerrilla force in the western plain of Eritrea, and thus it began a war that was to last nearly 3 decades. In the early years of the ELF drew support from Muslim communities in the western and eastern lowlands, as well as the northern hills. It also sought support from Sudan, Syria, Iran, and other Islamic states, used Arabic as its official language, and adopted Arab nomenclature in its organization. Ethiopian authorities portrayed the movement as an Arab tool and sought to rally Eritrean Christians to oppose it. Deteriorating economic and political conditions in Eritrea, however, combined to produce the opposite result. The EPLF had made its presence felt by 1974, when the imperial regime in Ethiopia collapsed. While the power struggle for the succession was waged in Addis Ababa, the two Eritrean fronts liberated most of Eritrea. By 1977, the nationalist revolution seemed on the verge of victory, yet it was not to be. A military dictatorship, also espousing Marxism, emerged in Addis Ababa, and armed and assisted by the Soviet bloc. The new Ethiopian regime was able to regain most of Eritrea in 1978. Warfare on a scale unprecedented in sub-Saharan Africa raged for the next 2 decades. The Ethiopians made enormous efforts with massive land attacks and heavy weaponry, but they had no success against the small and lightly armed guerrilla forces. The violence of war and indiscriminate oppression in their homeland turned most Eritreans against Ethiopia, thereby producing a steady stream of young recruits for the nationalist movement. Throughout the 1980s, the fighting was carried out by the EPLF, which by 1981 had succeeded in eliminating the ELF and had emerged as the unchallenged champion of Eritrean nationalism. In the latter parts of the decade, the Soviet Union terminated its military aid to Ethiopia, unable to find another patron, and faced with armed rebellion in other parts of the country, the regime in Addis Ababa began to falter. The final act occurred in 1991 when a rebel military offensive led by the Tigray People's Liberation Front swept towards the capital. The Ethiopian army disintegrated, and in May, the EPLF assumed complete control of Eritrea. 3 decades of war had produced among Eritreans a sense of unity and solidarity that they had not known before. Indeed, an entire generation had come of age during the struggle for independence, which was now to become a reality. The new regime in Ethiopia supported Eritrea's independence, and its separation was effected in a referendum held 2 years after liberation on April 23rd to 25th of 1993. The overwhelming majority of Eritreans voted for independence. On May 12th, the new president of Eritrea, which I cannot pronounce the name of, was made president of the transitional government, and on May 24th he proclaimed Eritrea officially independent. To sum up Eritrea's modern history, Eritrea modern day is known for having poor relations with its neighbors and being one of the strictest dictatorships on the planet. So that is it for the history of Eritrea, but now for the 5 fun facts. The name Eritrea translates to Red Sea in Latin or Greek or whatever it is, but it's named after the sea that's next to it, or the sea is named after Eritrea. The second fact is that the 30 leaves on the Eritrean flag represents the number of years of civil war that led to Eritrean independence. The third fact is that Eritrea has the lowest level of press freedom in the world for the second year running. The fourth fact is that Eritrea has only ever had one president, and it was that president that proclaimed Eritrea's independence. And the last fact is that one of the oldest human skeletons in the world was found in Eritrea. So Eritrea is one of the places on the entire planet with the oldest known human history. Anyways, that's it for the history of Eritrea.